name is Hasan Newash. I'm director of the Palestine Cultural Office here in the Detroit area, and I am a long-time activist in defense of Palestinian rights, and I'm also part and representing the U.S. Palestine National Conference, or that is going to be holding a convention all inclusive of Palestinians in the U.S. in Chicago at the end of October. They asked me to take this role. Originally, somebody from San Francisco was going to come here and ask me to, since I am on the executive committee, I will do the subbing. Let me just frame what it is that we're going to see in Arabic, and since I have a translation, I suggest that maybe we beam it for about 5 minutes as opposed to 10 minutes, and I will, that way the translation will take probably 10 minutes, and then I'll just briefly clip through my own additions and my perspective as to what it is that I need to appeal to you to do. But the framing is this. How many of you are familiar with the word apartheid? I mean, I know this is silly, but so many of you are younger, so how many of you were involved in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa? So about half of the client. Now, let me start with the fact that Bishop Tutu, when he went to visit Palestine, you may have heard it from other speakers, hopefully I'm not redundant, but he said, as he approached the Gaza border, saying, actually this is worse than apartheid. And then goes on to President Carter, former President Carter, who brokered the peace agreement between Egypt and Israel, and publishes a book saying, is it peace or apartheid? Again, he uses the term apartheid. And for these kind of terms, then as long as the Jews who are anti-Zionist and anti-apartheid Israel and the practices of Israel would call it like it is, they call themselves a self-hating Jew. And so a few of them actually lost their jobs as professors and intellectuals because they are self-hating Jews. One of them is Norman Finkelstein, who lost his post in DePaul outside Chicago because of that reason. Mark Ellis, who has been on the forefront of opposition to Zionism and its danger to Judaism, who is a theologian and a scholar, he had a hard time for a long time getting tenure or even getting placement. He ends up getting it in Baylor, although he was actually teaching earlier in more prestigious schools. And then on, I mean, just one last example, we have Ilan Pape, who also, again, he used to be a professor at the University of Haifa in Israel, where the only democracy, quote unquote, in the Middle East. He was actually essentially chased away and living now in London because, again, of his criticism of the practices of Israel apartheid. Now, the Abraham Borg, who used to be the Speaker of the House, the Knesset chairman of the Knesset, which is the Parliament of Israel, ends up moving to Paris because his terms are actually, we are copying Nazi practices on the Palestinians by the Israelis. Now, framing this, therefore, I am telling you what we are going to hear in Gaza, and my friend Ilyas is going to call it the largest prison, open-air prison in the world. And indeed it is, because it has been this way for the last 3 years. Outside, the onslaught and the massacre, don't even call it a war. It was a massacre against people where they have no place to escape. This is the only time in history in which a war would be conducted against a people where you are not allowing them to go anywhere. And indeed, there was no place for them to go. They were confined within walls by Egypt and by Israel, bombarded for 22 days, and you know the casualties, 1,400 killed. Mostly 72 of them, or 82% of them, are civilians, and a lot of them are children and women. It is in this kind of a framing we want to hear a trade unionist come and appeal to you to do something. And his appeal actually is essentially two parts. One is to have you take on BDS and have you start defending your brothers and sisters in Palestine. and the other is actually think about really boycotting the Histadrut, because it is a Jew only from the history, from the beginning of the 1920s, to protect the Jewish labor and excluding Palestinian labor based on Judaism. The Histadrut, which is the labor union of Israel. And it is actually no surprise, the Histadrut actually is in alliance with the government of Israel most of the time, and that's why it becomes awkward relationship, because it is the reflection of the Zionist movement and the establishment of Israel. So here it is. Now, one last thing, and I will ask for, under what condition anywhere in the world it is illegal for you to dig a cistern to collect rainwater in front of your house? You tell me, under what system you have ever heard? Raise your hand, please tell me, inform me. It is illegal to do it in Israel for the Palestinians.
Also for the Druze who live in the Golan Heights.
Under occupation,
Yes,
indeed.
I was there 5 years ago.
It is against, if you are a Jew living in Israel, forgive me to use the word Jew, but it is actually an exclusivist system for Jews only. If you are a Jew from Australia, you have immediate right to citizenship as soon as you land your foot on Israel. Whereas I'm a refugee from West Jerusalem, I was ejected with my family in 1948. I have no right to go back, and I go and visit my house, my father built, and looking at it, and I say, my God, and still in Arabic around the archway saying, whoever comes in here is safe. It is my father's handwriting, carved into the stone, and yet I can't go back. And yet any of you, if you're Jewish, you can do that at any time with free interest loans, etc. It is that kind of framing that we need to take in perspective when we hear this appeal as what he calls al-fasl al-unsuri, or the apartheid system of Israel. It is no exaggeration. If you need more time, I'd be happy to provide more information. It's okay for us to roll it.